safety, and we have spoken about this in the past, and I think it's SB 442.
That's correct.
SB 442. And of course, every summer we hear about these tragedies taking place around the country, let alone the Bay Area.
That's right.
So let's start with the main purpose of the Act.
Sure. As you mentioned, Pat, so many children are subjected to drowning or near drowning events. It's devastating to families in our areas. Hundreds of children are affected every year.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first time, this law became effective January 1st, 2018. It put someone in charge of deciding or making an evaluation of what safety devices were in place, and then making recommendations for enhancements of those safety devices if they were not.
Okay, because you were a swimming pool contractor.
That's correct.
Right, and you're a home builder, and you've inspected tens of thousands of homes by now over the decades. Let's, I think, in terms of buying and selling homes, let's start with the gate.
Sure.
Going into the side of the house.
So for many people, if they had a swimming pool or a spa in place, they felt safe if there was a circumference fence around the property because they were keeping the neighbors out of the yard unattended.
Okay. And I think we have a picture of we're talking about the fence around the house or the fence around the pool?
Well, for years, that was all that was required.
Is the fence around the house?
Fence around the
yard.
Protect the people from the neighbors from having access to your yard. But this new law and the safety aspects of it is talking specifically about protecting the inhabitants of the home from gaining access to the swimming pool or spa.
Let's talk about that fence around the pool. 60 inches tall.
That's correct. We want to have a fence that's going to be a barrier that's protective of all children. So we want to have a 60-inch high fence, a fence that doesn't allow for even a small ball of 4 inches to pass through that fence. If it's higher than 2 inches off the ground, it is non-compliant. We want to have a gate that swings outward from the swimming pool rather than inward towards it. And we want to have a locking device and a spring closure on that gate so that we have, in effect, a positive barrier that keeps children out of that area.
Now, by the way, for years we would have on the gates of the yard, by the garage and the front of the house, we wanted to have that spring loaded and automatically shut.
Right.
And those hooks would be 5 or 6 feet in the air.
That's correct.
Right? Now we are doing that for a second set of fences around the pool.
That's correct.
Okay.
And even in those instances where we have smaller yards, Pat, we have 5 feet between the pool and the home, we still want to have a barrier between that home, the access doors and windows that would lead into the area.
Okay, because the most popular one was that removable mesh fence. Can you
Sure.
speak to that?
Sure. So mesh fences over time have improved dramatically, but there are so many requirements that are now necessary for safety. One would be the height of the fence, the obscurity of that fence. If it's too tightly woven, you're not going to be able to see through it and see whether a child is in the pool. You're supposed to have that mesh fence set in anchors that are at least 3 inches deep. The poles are supposed to be some 48 inches high. But what's interesting is that the gate has to be, the latch on the gate has to be some 54 inches high.
Wow.
So, and we also want to make sure that we haven't installed that mesh fence so close to the swimming pool edge that there's no room to walk around that interior portion of the pool.
Okay, now we also have the automatic gates, the covers. This was, for years we had those famous commercials with the baseball pitcher,
Sure.
Famous athlete, standing on the cover.
Yes.
Can you speak to those?
So we have mechanically operated safety covers, and we have those that are manually driven across the swimming pool.
And does that comply with this law?
It does. Both of them do. However, the mesh on the fence, the cover has to be of a certain grade. You have to know when it was installed and by whom it was installed, and those tags have to be posted visible on the cover itself. And what's also interesting is that on those mechanically driven covers, you want to make sure that the motor devices are protected, ground fault protected, so that there's no electrical shock hazard. But we also want to make sure that the key device or the switch is of a certain height, some 60 inches off the ground. We don't want to have them in a position where children could gain access to those easily.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good
And
point.
we want to make sure that those retrieval devices are such that they will stop on a dime and reverse if necessary, so that it doesn't have to go fully to the end of the pool before it returns. And we want to make sure that that you have visible sight when you're operating that switch, that you can see the swimming pool. It's not in the house or in the garage somewhere, so that you're not possibly
Closing,
entrapping
okay.
a child.
Okay, alarms. For years there was a floating alarm, which is very popular. So if something splashed into the pool, it would be set off.
Yeah. Personally, I have some concerns about that as an option, because batteries fail. Hearing is such that if it doesn't make a loud enough noise inside the home, you may not be able to hear it. And then there's also the possibility of many, many false alarms from wind-driven activity and animals splashing.
I see, okay.
So as an option, it is there available to you. I don't have personal a lot of confidence in it.
Okay. Well, the alarms that they're speaking about is one for the doors leading out to the backyard, and one, there's a new type of alarm that sits flush on the deck.
Yeah. So basically we have those that are attached to doorways and windows, and we want to have them at a certain height, and the decibel rating on those is significant so that it's heard throughout, and it's continuous. So it doesn't just tell you that a door is open once, it continues. The door is open, we need help. Do something about this.
Okay. What about the one on the water? There's one
So the
here.
water has a device that goes as a probe into the water of the pool. The device itself doesn't float in the pool, it's attached to the deck itself.
And it senses water
It
movement,
senses vibrations in the water, yes.
which is a lot more reliable than the floating,
That's correct.
right? Okay. Now, in terms of public pools, how does this affect the public pool?
So SB
Communities?
448 is specifically designed, 442 is designed specifically for single-family residences. So if you have a community pool or apartment complex, public pool, this is not affecting that.
Okay. Now, speaking of pool safety, let's go into your pool inspections,
Sure.
which you do often. Now, I always wondered, how is it possible they have a pool light? How is that possible? It's not shocking people. Whenever they say, I always thought that was weird. How can we have electrical and water and be safe about it?
Good question, Pat. The issue, of course, is grounding, bonding, and ground fault protection. So we have all of those components, when they're working correctly, protects bathers and water from electrocution.
Now, is that the pool light, is that 110?
No,
or is that a low voltage?
It's 220
It's 220.
in many cases.
Wow.
We have, so we have to protect that in special conduit, brass conduit. We have to have the light connections where the wires are made above water level by 12 inches or more, and a
Okay.
certain distance away, including where the connection points are and where the switches are located.
Okay. Now, drains. We have a problem with drains. The hot tubs, jacuzzis, even a swimming pool with a two horsepower pump or whatever, that's a lot of suction, and children get their arm or leg cut in there.
We've had some
Terrible stories.
terrible situations.
Yes.
But what's happening is that for many, many years, we accepted the fact that a grate style main drain cover was acceptable. It's no longer acceptable at all under any circumstances. It has to be an anti-vortex cover, which is a domed type cover with openings around the outside edge of that.
Yes.
Preferably, we'd like to have those separated by a distance if you have multiple pumps, so that at no time could one person
Yes.
entrap themselves and not get loose.
The big problems originally was they had the grate. It would become brittle,
Yes.
break, and that was the only drain from the pool or spa.
That's right.
Or the jacuzzi. And that was a real tragedy. Okay, let's get into the inspection side. So you walk in the backyard and you see the coping around the pool up and down. We've done a show on settling.
Yes.
That's an issue. And then you look in and maybe there's a crack in the plaster.
Sure.
What's happening with that swimming pool?
Anytime you have a breach in the surface coating, which is in this case plaster, you know that you potentially have a place for leakage to occur. And once leakage is imminent and you're beginning to lose water, that water goes into the shell of the swimming pool and it affects the steel. The steel, in many instances, will corrode, expand, and contract. And
Now the steel is the rebar that shapes the original swimming pool.
that's right.
Wow, okay. Now in terms of, well, first of all, how do we correct that? And is it costly?
It is very costly. In some instances, you would start by just doing a water level evaluation to see if you're losing water. So swimming pools will lose probably 1/4 of an inch per day, so up to an inch a week would not be unreasonable. But once you're reaching 2 to 3 inches a week, you know that you have a problem.
You're losing water.
Yeah.
Okay. And of course you have to drain the pool to
Drain the
work
pool.
on it,
Hmm.
right? Now what about the swimming pool equipment? Oftentimes as a real estate agent, I go to these homes and the swimming pool equipment looks horrible. It's
Yes.
old, it's sunburned, it's out there 24/7.
Yeah. So oftentimes in our industry, we would place that equipment outside where it is subjected to ultraviolet radiation. We recommend that all of the plastic pipes be protected by paint and that the motors and things that they be serviced periodically. But unfortunately, rodents will nest in the heaters. We have all kinds of potential safety issues there.
What about in terms of the electrical on these pools? When you do a home pool inspection, what does your typical equipment inspection look like? Do you cite infractions that need to be corrected?
Yeah, all the time, unfortunately. One of the biggest issues is electrical bonding. We
Sure.
talked about that just briefly, but there's supposed to be a number 8 copper wire connected to each metal component in that swimming pool equipment. So the motors, the filter, the heater, all of those are supposed to be bonded, connected with that number 8 wire to protect from electrical shock.
That means the copper, it's a really flexible copper
Yes.
wire. It's attached from each
One point.
component,
Yes.
and then it's attached to a rod that goes into the ground?
Yes.
Okay. And that normally that's not in play.
Unfortunately, many pool motors are put in or changed out, and that bonding connection is lost.
Okay.
We're supposed to have bonding connections between all components that are metal. That would be handrails, ladders, fencing around the swimming pool, metal fencing, even air vent screens along the rear of the home that separate, or that's within close proximity to the pool.
Let's go back. So we walk back to the pool, and I know my parents had this, that the slabs around the pool had a barrier in between, and over time those rot out and whatnot. And there's a company, a great company, and they clean those areas out, and they put in a special type of plastic cement, and they color different types of sand in there,
Sure.
and it looks pretty.
Sure.
Okay. Now, the piece that goes over the pool, what's the name of that round piece that goes around the pool?
So that would be the coping?
The coping.
Mhm.
Now, the coping often is cracked.
Yes. So what happens, Pat, is 2 things. One would be that expansion joint, that mastic expansion joint, is a divider that separates any potential movement from the deck to the coping edge. If it weren't there and the deck were to move, tree roots or expansive soil,
Now, by deck, you mean cement slab.
That's right.
Concrete slab.
then it would push on that coping and break its integrity.
Now, oftentimes I see a piece of coping just sitting there. It's just detached.
Yeah.
And the beautiful tile that sat around the rim has been slowly falling off.
Yes.
How much of a repair is that?
It's a major repair. You need to drain the pool oftentimes and replace the tile. But what's interesting, Pat, is a condition that we find as soon as we look through the back side of that tile, we'll see a horizontal crack in the raised bond beam portion. That would indicate that there's actually a separation of the mortar that was used to hold the coping in place and the bond beam, which is part of the swimming pool. And that may be just a couple of inches or an inch below the coping edge. If that horizontal crack is there, then you can bet that when water gets up high enough that it's going to be going through that horizontal crack and into the bond beam.
I see. Now let's. I really make a living helping people flip their own house, fixing up their own house, getting it ready for the market. How would one redo their backyard? Let's say that by now the swimming pool was late 70s. It needs a makeover. But let's say that the concrete slabs that surround the pool are in good shape, but the coping needs help, and the tile needs help, and there's a crack. What's the mechanism? What's the steps to give a makeover?
So if the makeover includes refurbishing the swimming pool, let's talk about that first. Then you're draining the swimming pool, you're acid washing or sandblasting the surface of the swimming pool plaster, removing any loose debris, removing the tile and the coping, and establishing a new barrier. So that would be new plaster, new tile, new coping, and new mastic separating the expansion or the coping from the decking.
That's what it is. That's what we did in our parents' house with a little mastic is the material that is in between
rubber-based material, yes.
The slabs. Now, in something like that, can you do that in any season? No. Okay, I heard a story about in wintertime you don't want to drain a pool because it could pop out like a watermelon seed.
That's exactly right. The hydrostatic pressure of water that's within the ground can literally push a pool that's empty out of the ground. You can think of it like a battleship in the ocean. It floats even though it's very heavy. It's that hydrostatic pressure that is pushing that pool out of the ground.
Okay. Now, in terms of a makeover and something like that, what is that in the tens of thousands or thousands of dollars?
In the 70s, when I was building pools, it would probably be in the
hundreds.
No, yeah, 5,000 to 7,000 range. Now we're talking tens of thousands of dollars.
Really, to give a pool a makeover?
Yeah. Wow. My daughter recently had a pool built, and it was some $80,000. So.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it.
Okay. Now let's we move back. Let's say we walk around the corner. Let's say the spa is not connected. Let's say it's a hot tub. There's still hot tubs being made and installed, and
yes. So these are portable spas
with their own equipment.
With their own equipment, separated from the swimming pool. They don't have valves and pipes and similar connection points. And they are very popular, and they're becoming more popular now that they're using acrylic surfaces instead of fiberglass surfaces, and they're using simulated wood products around the perimeter as the pedestal instead of the older wood forms.
Now, I remember the hot tubs years ago. They would take a lot of water, hard to heat, and keeping the chemicals right was a problem.
Sure. So now that we're talking about a portable spa, we have thick foam insulation. We have an insulated safety cover on the pool, on the spa. Hopefully that safety cover would also have lockable devices so that it is in compliance with the SB 442 regulations.
And nowadays the portable spas, they have 3 drains, right, to offset that.
So basically,
skimmer?
basically they're separated from a distance. They have very, very small perforations in the drain cover, and they're anti-vortex devices as well. So with the safety, the economy, the durability of the equipment, I think portable spas is a wonderful way to go, as opposed now to how we used to build spas, which were part of the swimming pool where we would separate the water flow by directing the valves separating.
So let's talk about that. Let's say you're called on a job next week, and there's a swimming pool in the back. It was made in the early 80s, and there's a spa connected to it. And there's a wall separating.
The dam wall.
Yeah,
yes.
the dam wall.
Mm-hmm.
What do you look for there when you're doing an inspection?
So if the spa and the pool are of the same height, then it makes it a lot easier for the directional flow of water to be kept level. When we have spas that are elevated above the pool, sometimes they'll drain down the water so that we're only half full of water. So that would be an issue that we would talk about, leaking directional valves. We would also talk about the covers or the drain covers in the bottom to make sure that there are at least two and that they're separated by a distance and that they have the anti-vortex cover on them.
Now, I've seen a crack in the dam wall between the two. Is that still a situation you have to drain the pool and start over?
Sometimes you can use an epoxy filler to restore integrity between a surface of a spa and a pool. But when it's onto the outside of the pool, I'm thinking more in terms of draining the pool and reestablishing a integrity.
Isn't it a rule of thumb, if you're going to drain the pool and make one repair, you should do more than one repair? Maybe redo the tile or the coping.
Yes.
Things like that.
Yes.
Is there anything, what about the skimmer? Now, how does the skimmer work?
So the skimmer is a metal or plastic device that is a hole in the sidewall of the swimming pool, and it collects leaves and debris on the surface of the pool. It's one of the major points, unfortunately, that fails, that we get our cracks mostly from light fixtures or from drain fixtures or from the skimmer itself, and particularly the skimmer because it sits out on the side of the swimming pool and it's tied in with the decking, and if the decking moves, oftentimes it results in cracking of that weir of the upper portion of the skimmer.
Right, because that's very thin plastic and it
Yes.
has different temperatures, and eventually it's going to crack. So that's something, if you're redoing the pool, remodeling your pool, you would probably redo that component as well?
Absolutely.
Will the pipes running to and from the pool equipment still be good? Do you have to redo that?
So the question is how old the swimming pool is. So oftentimes in the older days we would use copper from one point to another.
Really?
And copper, over time, when you have acidic water going through it, will get perforations in it and you'll have leaks through there. So at that point in time, it would be a desirable thing to probably replace that plumbing with PVC.
How would you replace plumbing on a drain on a pool? The drain?
So you have to jackhammer a hole in through the bottom of the pool and connect itself to that pipe.
So in other words, would we wanted it are swimming pools replumbed on a regular basis, or is
Not
that
on
rare?
a regular basis.
It's a rare.
It's a rare thing.
Okay.
And so it leads us to the next question is, after a point, these older pools become so deteriorated, cracked, the plumbing is out of sync or it's leaking, that it's no longer viable to reestablish a pool.
Right, which is a good lead-in to removing pools.
Yes.
So in that case, oftentimes we hear a lot of, I would say probably 10 years ago, people started to remove swimming pools.
Probably older than that, but yeah.
Okay. It became popular.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the remaining minutes here, how does that take, do you have to get a permit for that?
Yeah, what you want to do is make sure that you properly dispose of or break through the surface of that pool, so that if you don't want to just dump debris in there and hope that it's going to stay in the ground. We have that hydrostatic pressure always that we're having to deal with. So we want to punch holes through that surface and allow the moisture from the ground to soak into that area. Then oftentimes they'll use a tractor to demolish the decking, break it up, and throw that into the swimming pool structure. Over time, then they would put gravel and dirt and make a planter out of it.
I've heard a lot about having people do it incorrectly, and then you have a sinkhole in your backyard.
That's right.
Okay.
We had one instance where they kept the swimming pool and built a wood deck over the top of it.
Oh my gosh. that could be something not to do.
Something not to do.
Okay. Eric, thanks again for coming out.
Sure.
You're always our favorite guest. Thanks again for watching Kapowich on Real Estate. This is a program dedicated to consumer protection within the residential real estate arena. If you were listening to the show, you can see it at Create TV or on YouTube. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you next week. Take care.